I knew I was done the moment my brother showed up at my door with that fake desperate look he always used when he wanted something from me. He didn't even say hello. He just pushed past me like he lived there. I stood there frozen. Because I'd seen this pattern too many times. He only came when he needed something. And judging by the folder in his hand and the way he kept pacing like a trapped animal, this time was no different. I took a slow breath, trying not to let my frustration spill out too early. But he beat me to it. He blurted out that he needed money. A lot of money. And he needed it today. For a second, I didn't say anything. I just watched him move around my living room like he was searching for the right place to drop his guilt. He kept talking, throwing excuses into the air: bad decisions, overdue bills, a landlord threatening eviction. His voice carried this mix of panic and entitlement that had always made me uneasy. I listened, but I stayed quiet. Because I knew the truth he didn't want to say. He had already borrowed from everyone else. I was his last option. And he expected me to be the easy one. He said he'd pay me back for sure this time, which was almost funny, because the last 3 times he said that, I never saw a single dollar again. I reminded him of that, but he just waved his hand like those debts didn't count anymore. He tried to guilt-trip me next. Told me family helps family. Told me I was lucky I wasn't struggling like he was. Almost implied that my stability was an insult to him. Something in me snapped a little when he said that. I'd worked 2 jobs for years. I'd pulled myself out of the same rough childhood he had. The only difference was that I didn't use it as an excuse to avoid responsibility. But he always found someone else to clean up his mistakes. So when he finally asked if I'd transfer him the money right now, I told him no. Just one word: no. His face twisted like I'd slapped him. He demanded to know why. So I told him the truth he'd been avoiding for years: I'm not your safety net anymore. He stared at me, stunned. Then his anger boiled over. He accused me of abandoning him. He accused me of thinking I was better than him. He told me Mom would be disappointed in me. That last one stung. But I didn't let it break me. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't about family. This was about him not wanting to take responsibility again. He stormed around the apartment, grabbing his things, muttering about how I was selfish, heartless, cold. Then he slammed the door behind him. And for a brief second, I felt guilty, but it faded when the quiet settled in, because for the first time in years, my home didn't feel like a place where he could walk in and drain me. It felt like mine again later that night. My phone exploded with messages from relatives. He'd already told everyone his version of the story. They sent me paragraphs about how I should support him, how he was going through a lot, and how I had the financial ability to help, so I should. But none of them knew the whole picture. None of them had seen him gamble away rent money, quit jobs after 1 week, or lie his way out of consequences. None of them had been the one he always called when things fell apart. I used to feel obligated to hold him up. But all it did was encourage him to sink deeper. A week passed before I heard anything else. Then I got a short text from him. Just for words, I figured it out: no apology. No acknowledgement of anything. But those words told me everything I needed to know. He didn't need my help. He just needed me to keep enabling him. And when I didn't, he finally helped himself. I sat there staring at the message, letting the relief wash over me. Because maybe refusing him wasn't an act of coldness, maybe it was an act of finally letting him grow up. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the villain in the story he created. I felt like a person who finally chose peace over guilt. And honestly, that choice felt better than any money I could have given him. The night I kicked out my roommate, it didn't happen with shouting or slamming doors. It happened in complete silence, which somehow made it hurt more. I never expected things to get this bad between us when we first moved in together. He was the kind of guy who made everything feel easy. He paid rent on time. He picked up his mess. He even asked before inviting friends over. I thought I'd lucked out, but comfort can change people, or maybe it reveals who they really were. The shift started small little things I brushed off because I didn't want to seem petty. Dishes left for days. Laundry piling up in the hallway. Loud calls at 2 a.m. when I had work the next morning. He laughed when I mentioned it, saying he'd get to it later, but later never came. Still, I held on, hoping he'd snap back to the person I thought he was. Then he stopped buying groceries entirely. He'd stare into my fridge like it owed him something. Little by little, my food disappeared: milk halfway gone, bread slices missing. Leftovers suddenly accidentally thrown away. When I confronted him, he shrugged, saying he'd replace everything. But he didn't, and then came the electricity bill. It was triple the usual amount. I opened the usage report and felt my stomach drop. He laughed. That was the moment something inside me cracked. But the final straw wasn't the mess, the food, the bills, or the noise. It was trust. I came home early from work one afternoon and found him in my room standing beside my dresser with the drawers half open. He didn't jump or look embarrassed. He just stared at me like I'd interrupted him doing something normal. I didn't even raise my voice. I just asked him what he was doing. He said he was borrowing cologne. Except he hadn't asked. Except he'd opened drawers that had nothing to do with cologne. Except I noticed things looked moved. Not missing, but disturbed. Like someone had gone searching for something valuable. My hands shook as I told him to get out of my room. He rolled his eyes and said I was being dramatic. But I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I didn't justify anything. I simply walked to the kitchen, opened the cabinet where we kept our lease papers, and placed his copy of the roommate agreement on the table. When he walked out to see what I was doing, his face shifted confusion, then annoyance. Then something close to fear. I told him he had 2 weeks to move out, no negotiation, no debating. He tried everything: jokes, guilt, fake outrage, promises to change. But his words felt flimsy, like he didn't believe them himself. I didn't raise my voice. That almost seemed to scare him more. For the next few days, the apartment felt heavy. Every sound echoed. Every silence felt like it was waiting to break. He moved slowly, packing a little each day, avoiding me like I was a threat. But underneath that avoidance, I knew what he was really feeling: shame. Not because of what he did, but because he lost control. I was no longer someone he could step over. On his final day, he paused by the door with his last box. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He didn't even meet my eyes. He just asked one question: "Are we good?" I could have lied to make the moment easier. I could have softened the truth the way I always had. But I didn't. I told him we weren't good, not now, not for a long time, maybe not ever. For the first time since the day we moved in together, he looked small. Then he walked out without another word. When the door clicked shut, the apartment felt different, lighter, bigger. Like space I'd forgotten belonged to me. I expected to feel lonely or guilty or angry. But instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: relief. I walked back to my room, opened my dresser, and checked everything. Nothing was missing. Nothing was stolen. But it didn't matter. The violation wasn't about objects. It was about trust I could never get back. That night, the apartment was quiet in a way that felt peaceful, not empty. I made dinner without worrying if someone would take the leftovers. I turned off lights knowing the bill wouldn't triple next month. I closed my door and knew it would stay closed unless I chose otherwise. People think kicking someone out is about anger, but sometimes it's about reclaiming space you forgot you deserved. And for the first time in a long time, I slept without feeling like someone else's chaos was breathing next to me. I should be known the trip was going to be a disaster the moment my friends started planning it, like my wallet was included in the package. It started with one simple suggestion: let's take a weekend trip. I loved the idea. I wanted a break. I wanted something fun to look forward to. But the second I agreed, everything spiraled. They picked a huge luxury Airbnb over what any of us usually spent. Then came fancy dinner reservations, overpriced activities, wine tours, boat rides, spa sessions. It was like they were planning a celebrity vacation using someone else's budget, and every time the price climbed, someone joked, "Don't worry, she can cover it." They meant me. At first I laughed. Then the joke kept repeating. And repeating. And slowly, the laughter stopped feeling innocent and started feeling expected. When the payment link finally arrived, reality hit me hard. They wanted me to pay the entire cost upfront. It wasn't a small amount. It wasn't even a let me think about it amount. It was the type of number that made my stomach drop. I said I wasn't comfortable paying for everyone. That's when everything changed. They said I had a good job, that I made more than them, that I was overreacting. One even said, "You can just put it on your card, we'll pay you back later." But later never came with this group. Every outing, every dinner bill someone forgot. Someone couldn't transfer right now. Someone said, "I'll get you next time." This trip was just a bigger version of the same problem. I reminded them again that I didn't want to pay the whole amount. They ignored it and kept planning like I'd already agreed. The day before the trip, they sent the final cost breakdown. It was even higher than before. Something in me finally snapped, not in anger, but in clarity. I messaged, "I'm not going on the trip. And I'm not paying for anything." The chat went silent. Then it blew up. They called me selfish. Said I was ruining their plans. Said everything was booked and I had to go. Not because they wanted me there, but because they needed my money there. I didn't argue. I left the group chat and put my phone down. For the first time since the planning started, I felt calm. The next morning, I made coffee, turned on music, and enjoyed the quiet. No guilt, no pressure, no drama. Then my phone buzzed with a message from the one friend who never joined the toxicity. "You need to see this." He sent a screenshot. The airban had canceled. Not because of me, but because the group never paid their share on time. They assumed I'd cave. They waited too long, and now the platform charged them a late fee on top of losing the booking. Their reaction? They blamed me again, but the story wasn't done twisting. A couple hours later, the Airban host messaged me directly. Someone from my friend group had tried to log in and impersonate me to fix the booking. It triggered a fraud alert. She asked if everything was okay. I explained enough so she understood. She apologized. Then she offered me something surprising. "If you ever want to rebook the place just for yourself, I'll honor the same rate." I didn't take it, but the irony was delicious. Later that evening, the group finally sent me another message. Not to apologize. Not to reflect. But to guilt-trip me again. "You could have helped us. You knew we didn't have the money. Help." I wasn't their mother. I wasn't their sponsor. I wasn't responsible for funding for grown adults. I typed back, "You didn't want me on the trip. You wanted my card." No one responded. That night, the same friend who sent the screenshots called me. He told me the others had been talking for weeks like my income somehow belonged to the group. They planned the whole trip assuming I'd pay because I always did. Then he said, "The moment you said no, the whole thing collapsed. That should tell you everything." He was right. A month later, the same group tried planning another vacation, but this time, everyone asked for upfront payments. No one volunteered their card. No one wanted to cover it for now. No one offered what they expected from me. The trip never happened, and that's when everything finally clicked. They didn't want a vacation. They wanted an all-expenses-paid vacation funded by me. When I stepped back, their real intentions showed instantly, and karma handled the rest. For once, choosing myself wasn't selfish, it was necessary. And the collapse of their perfect trip wasn't my fault. It was the cost of their entitlement. I didn't expect honesty to cause so much trouble. All I wanted was to answer a simple question the way any normal person would. It happened at work, on an ordinary Tuesday, the kind of day where nothing feels important until suddenly everything does. My coworker Dan stopped by my desk, holding a stack of papers and wearing that nervous half-smile people get when they want reassurance, not truth. He asked me what I thought about the presentation he'd put together. Just a simple question. Except it wasn't. I knew the moment he asked that he didn't want real feedback. He wanted validation. He wanted someone to tell him it looked good, that he didn't need to fix anything, that he could turn it in without worry. But the presentation, it wasn't good. Not terrible. Not hopeless. Just scattered, rushed. Missing pieces that mattered. And I wasn't the kind of person who could lie to him just to keep things smooth. So I told him the truth, calmly, gently, directly. I told him the visuals were strong but the content was thin. I told him the flow didn't connect. I told him he needed a clearer message or the executives wouldn't understand the point. I didn't think I was harsh. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make it personal. I just explained what needed work. He stared at me for a long moment, blinking like he'd just been handed bad news from a doctor. Then he nodded slowly and walked away without saying anything else. I thought that was the end of it. But a few hours later, he came back not with a revised presentation, but with an expression that made my stomach tighten. He said my criticism embarrassed him. He said I made him feel stupid. He said I could have lied a little, or sugarcoated it, or said it was fine the way it was. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't trying to hurt him. But the truth had hurt anyway. I apologized for the way it made him feel, but I didn't apologize for being honest. I told him I'd rather someone tell me the truth and save me from looking unprepared. He didn't agree. He walked away again, this time faster. By the next morning, I heard the whispers. People saying I'd gone too far, people saying I was too blunt, people saying I always think I'm right. It felt strange because I hardly ever shared opinions unless someone asked, and when Dan asked, I genuinely thought he wanted a real answer, but somehow, honesty had turned into a crime. Later that day, my manager called me in. She asked about the interaction. I told her exactly what happened, every word, every detail. She listened quietly, not interrupting. When I finished, she sighed and said something I didn't expect. You weren't wrong. You were just talking to someone who didn't want the truth. Then she asked if I'd help Dan fix the presentation. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say no. But I could see how badly this had affected him, and I knew he wasn't a bad person, just easily overwhelmed. So I said yes. When we sat down to work on it later that afternoon, the energy between us felt different. He wasn't defensive. He wasn't upset. He wasn't acting like I'd attacked him. He was listening. I walked him through each section slowly, asking him what he wanted to say, helping him shape the scattered ideas into something clear. As we kept working, his shoulders relaxed. His voice steadied. He stopped taking every suggestion as criticism and started seeing them as improvements. By the time we finished, he looked almost relieved. Before he left, he said something I didn't expect. I didn't know how to handle the truth before. But I'm glad you didn't lie. It was the closest thing to an apology I would get. And honestly, it was enough. The next day, he delivered the presentation. And he nailed it. The executives praised his clarity. They told him it was one of the cleanest proposals they'd seen that quarter. He walked back to his desk with a confidence I hadn't seen in him before. He glanced at me on the way and gave a small nod. A quiet thank you. No grudges. No awkwardness. Just understanding. I realized then that the truth isn't the problem. It's how unprepared people sometimes are to hear it. And maybe that's why honesty feels like a weapon when it's really a mirror reflecting what someone doesn't want to see. But in the end, that reflection made things better, not worse. And for once, telling the truth didn't leave me feeling guilty. It left me feeling like I helped, even if the road to that understanding was messy. I always believed karma worked slowly, quietly, in ways you barely noticed. I never expected to watch it unfold right in front of me like a movie I didn't buy a ticket for. It started with the new guy at work, Kevin. He was charming in that artificial way that makes you suspicious if you pay attention long enough. At first, everyone thought he was friendly, confident, helpful. But it didn't take long for the cracks to show. He had a habit of taking credit for other people's work. Not openly, he was smarter than that. He slipped himself into explanations, used we instead of they, found ways to stand just close enough to success that management assumed he had something to do with it. But he never did. He watched. He copied. He claimed. The first time he did it to me, I brushed it off. I didn't want to seem insecure or petty. But the second time, I felt that sting of frustration. And the third time, I realized it wasn't a fluke, it was a pattern. Still, I didn't confront him. Not because I was scared, but because I didn't think it would matter. People like him thrive on denial. They twist stories to make themselves look better. They play innocent so well that others start to believe it. So I focused on my work and stayed out of his way. But karma didn't. It came quietly at first, a few small inconveniences that seemed unrelated. He spilled coffee on his report. His laptop froze before a meeting. He missed an email and had to redo a task. Annoying things, but nothing serious. He complained constantly, but no one cared. Because he had been too busy taking credit to build real relationships with anyone. Then came the project that changed everything. Our manager assigned him a presentation for a major client. And for once, he couldn't steal ideas. He had to build it from scratch, his own research, his own words, his own effort. He looked confident on the outside, but I could see the panic beneath it. Every time I passed his desk, his screen was blank. Or he was scrolling through old files. Or he was staring at templates like they would magically write themselves. The night before the presentation, he stayed late. I left the office while he was still sitting there, typing frantically, shoulders tight with stress. And for a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. He'd put himself in this position, but it was still painful to watch. The next morning, the entire team gathered in the conference room. The client sat across the table, waiting. Our manager looked excited. Everyone expected something polished, impressive. Innovative. Evan stood at the front with his laptop connected to the projector. He clicked the first slide. It was blank. A quiet murmur passed through the room. He clicked again, still blank. The third slide appeared, but it wasn't a slide. It was a personal document, a list of copied notes. Screenshots from other people's work, pinned messages he'd saved from team chats, ideas he'd taken from others, even fragments of my old report. It was all there, everything he'd stolen. Laid out an accidental confession. The room fell silent. The client raised an eyebrow. My manager leaned forward, expression tightening. Someone in the back let out a quiet "oh no." I couldn't look away. Evan froze completely, hands trembling, face drained of color. He fumbled with the laptop, closing windows, clicking frantically, trying to undo the damage, but the truth had already spilled into the open. Our manager ended the presentation early. The client left politely but unimpressed, and when the room finally emptied, Evan just stood there, staring at the blank screen like it held the answer to everything he'd done wrong. He didn't try to blame anyone. He didn't make excuses. He didn't speak at all. He just packed his bag and walked out slowly, shoulders collapsed inward, like someone who finally realized their luck had run out. I thought that was the end of it. But the twist came later. A few days after the incident, I found a handwritten note on my desk. No name. No explanation. Just a folded piece of paper. Inside, it said, "I wasn't trying to steal your work specifically. I was trying to be someone I'm not. I'm sorry." It wasn't enough to erase what he'd done. But it wasn't nothing. The real twist wasn't his downfall. It was the fact that he finally understood it. Karma didn't destroy him. It revealed him to everyone, including himself. And sometimes, that's the harshest kind of justice. Because when you're forced to face the truth, there's nowhere else to hide.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the stories, don't forget to subscribe for more.